Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes, wrapping up their third official visit weekend. And, kind of going into the weekend, we knew we were not going to see two or three commitments coming out of the weekend immediately. But what we were all really excited about is, hey, getting a better feel of, hey, where does Miami sit with some of these players on the board? And who are the players that Miami's going to be turning the heat up on over the next couple of weeks and months, at least for me personally. That's the best part about official visit season. It is not only the visits and the commitments, but getting a better feel of what these boards look like as it pertains to the 2026 cycle, especially for a program that like Miami that look, they cast a wide net early on in the process, and it starts to get a little bit more narrow as time goes on. We're starting to get a little bit more clear of a picture of who the priority targets are for Miami in this 2026 cycle. We got a lot of big developments to talk about over the next 10 minutes. I'm fired up to get into it. Now, the best part about doing this, there are a lot of college football fans that they'll tune in when we break down commitments or maybe talk about official visit weekends. For the Miami fans, I've learned very quickly that y'all live for the nitty gritty roster building conversations. You guys live for the recruiting board conversations. Hey, what players do we want to see in this 2026 cycle? It's the best part about talking Miami football because I certainly love it too. We're going to talk about some new names. I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with some of the new names we're going to talk about. Man, let it fly in the comment section in terms of how you feel about these targets. Who are the guys that you think are must gets for Miami in the 2026 cycle? And as always, appreciate you guys. Y'all know how much fun I have talking this program. The amount of support y'all show the boys is amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, look, I don't want to bury the lead. We're 2 minutes in, and I think the biggest development we saw is Lamar Brown canceling his official visit to LSU. Now, there's a couple of conversations you have to get into this. Now, I think where I want to start is that I don't know if Miami is the leader in this race as we speak right now. I think Texas A&M clearly seems to be the program with the most amount of buzz in it. You look at LSU potentially dropping out of this recruitment, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the case because keep in mind Lamar Brown has been to LSU a ton of times over the last 12 months. So him just canceling the official visit, I'm not sure that means that LSU's out of it. But it certainly shows that the door is open for other programs in the Lamar Brown sweepstakes. And you go back to the board for Miami and you start looking at the names that are not highlighted in red and talk about the names that Mario Cristobal and Miami seem to be willing to push their chips into the middle of the table to go out and get. Think out of all the names you see on this board, I don't think there's a more of a priority target than Lamar Brown. And coming out of the official visit weekend that he took earlier this month, there was a lot of buzz around Miami, and I don't think that buzz has totally gone away. So you look at LSU potentially being out of the race. You look at it as maybe a Miami Texas A&M battle. I think you're sitting here Monday morning feeling a heck of a lot more confident in terms of Miami's chances at landing Lamar Brown than you did 24 hours ago when he was still slated to take his official visit to LSU. Now, why do I think Miami has a chance? Look at Mario Cristobal's track record in terms of, hey, when he finds guys that he likes, what positions are they normally at? What are the kind of players that Miami has shown us they're willing to go all in for? We saw it with Francis Maui-Noah. We just saw it with Jackson Campbell, and we probably saw it with Justin Scott as well. What do all three of those players have in common? They're line of scrimmage players. I think that Miami is very much willing to be as competitive as anybody in the country for Lamar Brown. And it feels very, very similar to the Jackson Campbell recruitment too. Whereas like all the smokes around Texas A&M, well, we got a couple more weeks until he's committing and Miami's just lurking. I think with LSU potentially not being as big of a factor as we thought they were, I think Miami's got a really good chance at him. And I'll say this, why is Mario Cristobal so willing to be aggressive for Lamar Brown? It's because very similar to Jackson Campbell, I don't think there are many guys that can replace what Lamar Brown can give you specifically in the 2026 cycle. You look at the other defensive linemen at the top of the board in the country, there's a gap. And I think the gap is rather significant between Lamar Brown in every other interior defensive line in the country. Like, I love Bryce Perry Wright, a little bit of a tweener. I think there's probably a better chance that he just hangs out as an edge defender. Jamarian Carlton from Texas, he's 6'5", 260. I'm not really sure he's the presence you were looking for in the middle of the defensive line. We've talked about it, pretty dang consistently all of 2026. The interior defensive line class is not great. And I think there's one guy that can be elite, and that's Lamar Brown, because there are not many guys that look and move and play like Lamar Brown. I wouldn't be surprised if Mario Cristobal gets extremely aggressive in this recruitment, and I think he can be an absolute difference maker on the inside. Number two, what's the other storyline coming out of the weekend? I think it's the buzz around Jay Lamar. I think we had a pretty good feel of what this running back class or board was going to look like for Miami, where you land Javion Mallory, the other target's Derek Cooper, and that's it. I think it was Derek Cooper or bust heading into the weekend. Well, it sounds like Miami sits pretty dang high with Jay Lamar. Now, we'll talk about the player, but I first want to talk about the process here. To me, this makes a lot of sense because now I'm going to try to be as clear as I can talking about this. Who is the main competition for Derek Cooper? It's Georgia. Who is the main competition for Jay Lamar for Miami? It's probably Georgia as well. It's almost like an insurance policy where, hey, Derek Cooper's the number one back on the board. He's arguably one of the top targets for Miami in this 2026 cycle. If we miss out on Derek Cooper, if he ends up going to Georgia, you're sitting here with probably an elite chance to land Jay Lamar, who I think is a very, very good football player as well. I think it's a really crafty move by Mario Cristobal and this Miami Hurricane staff to kind of ensure that, hey, we're going to be sitting just fine at the running back position in the 2026 cycle. You talk about Jay Lamar real quick. We talked about him a little bit. We didn't talk about him that much because we weren't really sure where Miami sat. This dude's a box checking running back, man. I think Derek Cooper might have a little bit more upside. That's probably why he's ranked a little bit higher. You look at Jay Lamar and say this, I don't mean box checker as a negative because I really do value these kind of running backs at the high school ranks. One, short area quickness, the ability to make people miss is incredible. He's got a really strong lower half, and it's very evident when you watch this film. He doesn't really go down. He stays on his feet exceptionally well. The contact balance is elite. He has the long speed to hit home runs, runs behind his pads. There's not really anything that Jay Lamar doesn't do at a high level, which you can't really say for a lot of backs in the 2026 cycle. There are so many running backs that are kind of one-trick ponies. Jay Lamar's checking all the boxes you want. Also seems very, very comfortable catching the football out of the backfield. Jay Lamar is suddenly a name that we got to talk about in the 2026 cycle, a guy that I like a lot, and, kind of pending the Derek Cooper recruitment, Jay Lamar very well might be that number 2 running back for Miami, especially with Javion Mallory exploring his options, taking a visit to Alabama. Really crafty for Miami to turn it up for Jay Lamar and kind of ensure, at least in my opinion, you go back to the board real quick, I'd be stunned if Miami does not come away with either Derek Cooper or Jay Lamar in the 2026 cycle. One of them is going to Georgia, one of them is going to Miami. You very well could make that case. The other name to monitor here, Tyrone Evans, who I didn't really know much about until it sounded like, hey, Miami likes this kid a lot. Then you dive into the film and say it makes kind of sense. In one, it makes sense why he's a little bit lower of a recruit right now. You look at him and say his sophomore year was quiet. Only 300 receiving yards as a sophomore, kind of explodes onto the scene as a junior. This kid passes the eye test. Go look at those official visit pictures that he just took for Miami. 6'3" seems short. 185 pounds is absolute garbage. This kid's got to be over 200 pounds. This is a wide receiver that looks the part. And then you turn on the film and say, yeah, he's really big. He's really fast, works vertically down the field. Much smoother mover than you would assume for a kid this size. You kind of look at the frame and say, all right, he's just going to be a big body that works vertically down the field. Turn on the film and say short area quicks. They're certainly there. He can create some separation in his route tree. This is a guy that looks the part. I think the film kind of backs it up. Very interested to see where Miami can take it with Tyrone Evans, especially when you talk about the wide receiver board. And I've been, kind of vocal that Calvin Russell, that's a tricky recruitment. And I think Miami really likes him. I wonder how much Miami is going to get into a bidding war for Calvin Russell. And everything you hear at every visit, and I don't love talking about this, but I feel like you have to talk about it for Calvin Russell. It seems like this is a recruitment where NIL is going to play a massive role in, and you could see some programs maybe get into a bidding war for a guy like Calvin Russell. And I think Calvin Russell's upside is tremendous. I think there's a very good chance he's a elite pass catcher for wherever he goes. The reason I mention it is there's some development, and many of y'all have heard me talk about this, that needs to take place. I would be surprised if Calvin Russell's a year one kind of guy. I quite frankly be surprised if he's a year two guy. I think there's a lot of development that needs to take place with a guy like Calvin Russell. All to say, how much and how aggressive is Miami going to be for a guy like Calvin Russell when you have some other wide receivers on this board that I think Miami likes a lot? Last name to talk about, Israel Briggs. It sounds like Miami's pretty comfortably the leader in the clubhouse. And I thought, maybe the stiffest competition is going to be Michigan. Well, as a Michigan fan, I'm pretty confident that Michigan's not going to take 3 tight ends. We already have 2 locked in. I'd be stunned if Michigan pushes very hard for Israel Briggs, who has tremendous upside at the tight end position. And here's what allows Miami to do this. Israel Briggs is a guy that if he's going to play tight end, it's going to take a little bit, right? There is some projection there in terms of what this body's going to look like, because it's not really close in terms of what you're looking for a tight end playing early on in his career. You put weight on this kid the right way, year 2, year 3, could be an exceptional matchup nightmare at the tight end position. And why Miami is probably so comfortable taking a guy like Israel Briggs is everything that we hear. I mean, you have Elijah Lofton who's only going into year 2. You hear that Miami really likes the young tight ends who are going to be freshmen in the 2025 year. You got some runway. Your roster is built that you have some time for Israel Briggs to not have to play immediately for Miami in the 2026 or 2027 year, making this one make a lot of sense. Miami's roster is built so that Israel Briggs does not need to play for Miami very early on in his career and can develop the right way. We knew we weren't going to get a ton of commitments that were coming out of the weekend, but we felt like we were going to get a better sense of where Miami sits with some of these guys. And from what we had coming out of the weekend, we talk about this a lot. Momentum can look all sorts of different ways. Momentum can look like commitments, but momentum can also just look like, hey, we're trending for a couple of guys, big time ways. That's kind of where Miami sits. And I think you pretty fired up about what late June, early July can bring in terms of commitments for Miami in the 2026 cycle. A lot more to talk about, a lot more to unfold, potentially some commitments that pop over the next couple of days. We'll see. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.